Well, I will ask you to grab a Bible, pull open a Bible, flip open a Bible, and you can turn to the book of Ruth, where we will be this morning. Old Testament, few chapters in. I'll give you a few minutes to turn there. I'm going to turn there, and we will be in a little bit mining Ruth for some lessons this morning. We are continuing a series that we started last week, a summer series that we are calling Better Together, on what the Bible tells us about friendship, what the Bible models to us about friendship. We saw Jesus last week. We looked at some of what the role hospitality played in Jesus' life, friendship. We're actually going to start this series, finish this series with some stories in Jesus' life, and talk about how Jesus loves us and befriends us throughout this series. Just a little bit of a recap if you weren't here last week. It was a holiday weekend. You may have missed that or maybe don't remember. A little recap. Last week as we began this series, we talked about hospitality and the theme that hospitality plays in the Bible from the Old Testament through the New Testament. We looked at a few of the verses, though it's all over, that hospitality is something that God urges in and wants in his people. And how we defined hospitality last week was the act, or maybe you want to say the art, of turning strangers into guests. So, and not necessarily in our households, but in our life, taking someone who, before that moment, was a stranger and welcoming them, maybe just into our life, as if they are a guest. It's a powerful, as Jesus shows us, a powerful part of his ministry, powerful part of our ministry as believers in him. And speaking of hospitality, before we move on this morning, I saw this in a book by Christian author Rebecca McLaughlin, a book called I think it's called No Greater Love. It's a book on friendship. And she talks about how in her church family, I think she lives out in Boston, but they have 3 rules of engagement their pastor came up with. And all the church knows these 3 rules about Sunday mornings. We'll put them up here on the screen. Here's their 3 rules of engagement. Number 1, as a church family, the rule is an alone person in our gatherings is an emergency. I love that. I love the word emergency. In other words, when you walk in to their church on a Sunday morning, the members and congregants know, hey, if we see someone who's alone, or maybe as a family walks in, they don't know anybody, that's something we put down everything and we go and greet them. That's hospitality. Rule number 2, friends can wait. Now, friends are important. We're doing a whole series on that. But sometimes we can get really caught up and we want to see our friends, and that's awesome. But before we know it, we have ignored other people to the benefit of our friends, and that's how cliques form. And so it's important to be putting aside friends for a moment to greet other people. And then rule number 3, and this is tied into friendships, of course, introduce a newcomer to someone else. We've talked about this last week, throughout this summer as we've been doing the Better Together bingo project together. What does it look like to make connections and create a web of relationships in the church? So I thought that was A, really cool, B, an excellent picture of hospitality in the life of a Christian. And as I said last week, hospitality is like pre-friendship. Right? It's that welcoming strangers into our lives. And so this morning we're going to dig into some of it. And we'll kind of go in stages throughout the series of what do some of the early steps look like in building friendships. It's important that we build friendships, so there's a lot of things working against us. Have you ever done this? I've done this so many times. Me and them, we'd be great friends if... I think we'd be really good friends if only we fill in the blank. If only they didn't live so far away, we'd be great friends. If I had more time, we'd be great friends. If I was in a different stage of life, we'd be great friends. You ever written an excuse like that? I have a family member by marriage. We both married into the family, and we used to always, at holidays, see each other. He lives several states away, so I'd see him once a year at special occasions, and we always just got along. We found ourselves at family gatherings. We'd be sitting together, talking, really connecting, and I'll tell you, for like probably 10 years, it was kind of like that. Man, I wish they lived closer. I think we could be really good friends. And then I think a few years ago, we just woke up to the fact that, hey, you can be friends and live far away. And so, not saying we're besties or anything, but we communicate throughout the year. It's turned into more of a friendship. How often do we, maybe you don't do this, I do this, evaluate a potential friendship and conclude it's not worth it, it's too hard? We're going to talk about that this morning, how to combat that. And as we dive deeper into friendship this morning, I want to work on with this premise. Here's our premise this morning. If you're taking notes, here's your first one. Friendship is a risk worth taking. That's simple but a powerful premise. That friendship in our lives is a risk and it's worth taking. Let's be real for a minute. Some of you feel me. Friendships can be terrifying, right? The thought of having a deep friendship with someone can be scary. For one, it's vulnerable. It's a scary thing to be known by somebody, to know them and their life, to do life together. That can be a frightening thing. To share your life, whether maybe it's your past, for someone to uncover things about you that maybe most people don't know, to uncover their thoughts, opinions on things, to uncover your true personality. And so more and more, we just don't do this in life. We conclude that friendships aren't worth it. And let's be honest, friendship is becoming rare. I could point out to all sorts of statistics. You've seen them. You know that in 2025, deep friendships, when they do studies on this, are incredibly, incredibly rare. Maybe a month or so ago, I was preaching in our series in 1 Corinthians, and I gave this example. I talked a little bit about AI companionship and some of the things kind of on the cutting edge of AI, how there are companions, friends basically being created for people that aren't real humans, but you can interact with them like a friend. And I was writing that message, and I was wrestling with, hey, I think this example is too out there. Like, how many people do we know that do this? This is kind of cutting edge. And I gave that message. Ended up giving that example. And before I think I even just left this room, someone greeted me and shared that they have a close family member who is an adult who would say that their best friend is an AI personality. And becoming one of their best, closest, and only deep friendships. This is something that's a reality in the world we live in because we're concluding it's too hard to be in a messy friendship with a human being. That sounds so weird, but it's so true. It's easier to engage something that's not real. I'm here to tell you this morning that God created us to be in close relationship with one another. We probably know that on a theological level, but it's harder to absorb in our real life. He's created us for relationships. And I don't just mean romantic relationships. That's often what we think of. In fact, when you say relationship, more often than not, we think of romantic relationships. But we are truly better together. God made us for friendships. Because God wired you for a relationship, first of all, with Him. You have a God who wants to know you and to be known. That's pretty awesome. And also, He has brought you into a relationship with others who have a relationship with Him. We call that the church. And so we are better together. We're wired for relationship. So we're going to look pretty briefly this morning. There's so much here, but I want to talk about the story of Ruth. If you don't know the story of Ruth, Ruth was faced with a huge risk. In fact, getting into a friendship with someone who also happened to be her mother-in-law was a huge risk, and decided that it was worth taking. And so I want to look at a little bit of the story in chapter 1, and we're going to see through this what I'm calling 3 markers of courageous friendship. We'll see the first one in a few minutes. But if you could turn to the book of Ruth, if you're not already there, a little bit of the context. We're told in the first few verses of Ruth a few things. One, this story takes place in the days of the judges. In fact, that first line reads, in the days when the judges ruled, or literally the Hebrew reads, in the days when the judges judged. So the book right before this, we looked at Judges in the last year together. It takes place in this time. There weren't yet kings. And a little spoiler alert, if you don't know Ruth, we find out at the end of Ruth that Ruth is a distant relative of King David. And so this is even before the time of the kings. There is this family, a man and his wife Naomi move out of the promised land. They end up in the land called Moab. It's a different country that wasn't far from Israel. And they have two sons. Those two sons marry two Moabite women. One of them is named Ruth. One of them is named Orpah. And what we find in these first few verses, sorry men, all the men in this family die. Naomi's husband dies. Ruth's husband dies. Orpah's husband dies. And so the three ladies are left in this land that's not original to Naomi. And they're wrestling with what to do. And it's just a reality of those days. If you were a woman and you lost your husband, you were kind of lost your connection to society. So much was centered around the man. And so here they are in this situation. And here's how this story not begins, but as we get deeper into it in verse 6, catch me there, it reads this. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her two daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. So pause there for a moment. Naomi is desperately trying to find care. Again, she has lost her husband. She's now kind of, but not really responsible for these two daughters-in-law. And she hears that God is working back in Bethlehem. Now, it doesn't say this explicitly, but if you know the book of Judges, we have these cycles, remember, where there's oppression in Israel, and then things are really bad. They cry out to God. He raises up a judge. Judge comes and saves them. It's not explicit, but it's likely that they had left during one of these times of oppression. Things are better now, and so they go, hey, I hear that God is on the move. God's working. And so we don't know Naomi's faith, but she sees an opening that God's doing something, and they're going to walk through that door and begin heading back towards Israel. This is the context of the rest of this book of Ruth. And I think provides us with the first marker of courageous friendship, and that's this. So here's number one. Courageous friendship walks through the doors God opens. Courageous friendship simply walks through the doors that God opens in our lives. I find in my own life this language of doors and open doors and closed doors to be really helpful, and just how we kind of figure out what God is doing in our life. We call it discernment. Discernment is knowing what's the door that God's opening, when that door is wide open, when it's maybe cracked open, how to feel that out, when a door is shut, and when to stop trying to go through it. God provides opportunities all the time. I wonder often, even in my own life, or often in my own life, how often I'm actually listening. Am I looking for the doors that God is opening? Here's the thing about the book of Ruth is God is obviously in the background in the whole thing. We don't see God mentioned that often. And yet here he's mentioned in the first few verses as doing something. And so Naomi is paying attention to this. She's going to go through this door. Ruth's going to use this opportunity to build a friendship. So Ruth is going to take initiative. Part of walking through open doors, too, and we'll keep coming back to this, is simply realizing that friendship is something good and something that God wants for our life. That's where it starts. So quick question before we jump back into the story. How often do you look for opportunities that God has put in front of you? Maybe in all areas of life, but specifically in friendship. How often do you see an opportunity right in front of you and decide, hey, I'm going to take this? We'll talk more about that, but let's jump back into the story. Now we see Ruth in action. We'll go through a big chunk here together. Verse 8. Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." So she says, "Go back, you'll be better off there." They say, "No, we want to come with you." Verse 11, but Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands?" Implied answer, no. "Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. If I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up?" Implied answer, no. "Would you remain unmarried for them?" Implied answer, no. And then she says, "No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." So Naomi is sending them away. By the way, this is the best thing for them. Again, given that society, the situation they were in as three widows together, they had no provisions. And so the best thing she could do is, hey, go and start over, go back to your home where your mother will be and presumably your father, and you can kind of get back on your feet. Naomi, in her mind, is walking to her doom. Like, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. I don't know what I'm going to do, but God's working there, and so maybe I'll benefit somehow from that. Orpah, out of the two daughters-in-law, takes the deal. Verse 14, at this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, so she goes, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, and don't miss this, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." This is one of the greatest declarations of human commitment in the whole Bible, is that Ruth is looking at Naomi. Remember, risk, friendship is a risk, and saying, "I'm going to go with you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, you stay. Where you eat, I'll eat. Where you play, you play. Where you scuba, I'll scuba. Whatever you do, I'm going with you. I'm going to do what you do." So she makes this big statement of commitment. So here's marker number 2 this morning. Courageous friendship sticks with it. Sticks with it. Friendship is a commitment. I think too often we want friendship. I don't know that any of us would say, "I don't want any friends," but are we willing to invest? I think often we're not, but Ruth is willing to invest, so she declares her devotion. You're going, so I'm going. I'm going to, because I'm going to stay committed to you. And by the way, this really is a friendship. I know they're connected through marriage, in a way relatives, but in a way they're really not. Ruth probably has more connections still to Moab, but she declares a friendship. We have a sister in Christ here at Rose Hill who uses this word to describe this, and I love it. It's the word sticky. Being sticky in relationships. True friendship takes stickiness. I had an incident recently where I was kind of trying to start up, I don't know if you'd call it a friendship or get to know someone. We didn't know each other really well, and so I had to, in order to get something to happen, to go out to lunch, I had to be sticky, and just to keep with it. There's some awkwardness in that, but I knew that it was worth it. It might look like regularly making time together with someone, or being willing to follow up. We'll talk more about that before we're done. Or periodically reaching out. We have to get over the awkwardness. And one of the things that we need to do is, again, realize that God has a plan for friendship. It is good. It is worth it. And it's worth keeping up with. And then to finish this story out, verse 19. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. Now they're in Israel. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Right? We remember her. But she says, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." Wow. Maybe you can relate to this feeling that Naomi has as she's lost everything. She actually is so affected by this, she changes her name. So she changes it to Mara. You might have known a Mara before. That's literally in Hebrew what the word means. It means bitter. You might have known a Mara, capital M. You might have known a lowercase Mara, right? Bitter. This is her. She's feeling this inside. So she's like, I'm just going to change my name. And I want you to think about this. Imagine Ruth, who just said, Naomi, I'm going to go with you wherever you go. And then she gets there, and Naomi's like, oh man, I'm just so bitter. Life's a mess. I'm just going to stay bitter the rest of my life. I just wonder, what is Ruth thinking in that moment? Like, I just made a big mistake. Oh, I forgot. I got to go home. I got a thing. My mom's calling me. I'm sick. I got something. I just got to get out of here, right? She's like, what did I just get into? That's probably what you and I would be doing, but not Ruth. Instead of running, here's what happens. Last verse. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Ruth stuck with her. Number 3, courageous friendship rides the waves. Mix some metaphors this morning. It rides the waves. Ruth rides it out, even in the bitterness. If we're going to pursue friendship, it's going to take a willingness to push through. Push through what? Awkwardness, push through differences, push through times when we miss each other, right? Like we're not just getting each other in this time, but we got to push through busy schedules, mood swings, difficult seasons. It sounds like a commercial for one of those, prescription drugs. Like you may have mood swings, difficult seasons. That happens sometimes in friendship. But courageous friendship pushes through all that because friendship is worth it. I love this verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 2. We finished 1 Corinthians together, and so the next chapter of 2 Corinthians 2, a little preview, Paul has this excellent exposition on comfort and how God comforts us in our lives. And one of the things that Paul says is the reason he does that in our hard times is so that we can comfort others. Or as he calls it, sharing comfort that abounds through Christ. Ruth showed this kind of comfort and friendship to Naomi. And so just to recap real quick, 3 markers of Christian friendship, or courageous friendship: walks through the doors God opens, it sticks with it, it rides the waves, or to use different language, if you want to write this on your note sheet, right by number 1, walks through the doors that God opens, you could write initiative. It takes initiative. Number 2, sticks with it, you could write commitment. Number 3, rides the waves, you could write perseverance. Initiative, commitment, perseverance. This is a picture of Ruth's approach to friendship, and is a beautiful picture of courageous friendship. Now, I told you this last week. Throughout this series, we're going to look at each week what I'm calling a better together practice. So here's this principle, here's this premise. How do we put it into play in our own life? And here's our better together practice number 2. Last week it was take initiative in hospitality. This week, in light of Ruth, it's be patient in building friendships. You want to work towards friendships in your life, being better together? Be patient in building friendships. It takes perseverance. Consider, book of Ruth, only 4 chapters. One of the chapters is the one we just went through. It's just Ruth persevering in following Naomi. If you're really serious about friendship, then have patience in building those friendships. There's a Greek philosopher about 300 years before Jesus named Aristotle. You've probably heard his name. He was a huge name in Greek philosophy. In fact, when Paul and the early Christians went into Greece and other places in the Roman Empire, they would have been greatly affected by Aristotle's work and teaching. And Aristotle talked about friendship and kind of provided the ancient framework to thinking through friendships. And he defined 3 types of friendships. The first, and we'll put them here on the screen, the first friendship that Aristotle wrote about was a friendship of utility. He said this is kind of the most basic kind of friendship. A friendship of utility is when you have a friendship and you get something from it. Like it benefits you in some way. You're thinking less about them in that friendship. You're thinking more about you. What can I get from them? So some examples might be for networking, right? I want to network, and so I'm friends with them for that reason. Or if you're in college or high school, you need to survive a class. I made lots of friends like this. And so you just tag, you're it. We're going to be friends. We're going to make this through this stage together. Or you have to pair up for something. And friendships of utility aren't inherently bad. That wasn't the point. But the point was they're easily gained and they're easily lost. In other words, when that usefulness is gone, the friendship goes away. And so you probably had friends in different stages of life, and those friendships dissipated. Why? Because you didn't have that use anymore. They couldn't network for you anymore. You weren't in that class together. The second kind of friendship that Aristotle wrote about was a friendship of pleasure. Similar to a friendship of utility, this one is you have something in common, something that you find pleasure in. So examples might be you play a sport together, or you're a parent and your kids play the same sport. And so you spend a lot of time on the sidelines or in the stands watching those games, and you strike up a friendship. You're enjoying something together. Maybe you have a similar sense of humor, or you're going through a similar life stage. I'd classify this as the right place at the right time kinds of friends. You might find in your life, and I've had friends like this, that you have a friend that you used to be close to and you drift apart, and years later you get back together with them and you realize you don't hit it off anymore, and you might be wondering why that is. A lot of times that's because you had this thing in common, a relationship of pleasure, and that thing wasn't there anymore, and so you found that you didn't have that friendship anymore. I heard, on a few occasions, I've heard Dr. Henry Cloud, the Christian psychologist, tell a story about him and his wife had some really good friends, and they would, and they were friends for a long time, and one night they were getting ready to go out together, and they were putting on their clothes and getting washed up, and he just looked at his wife and said, "Why are we even doing this?" Like, he didn't really like being around them that much anymore. He found himself not wanting to go out to dinner. They had kids at similar ages and kind of had a friendship. That didn't really exist anymore. And so they realized, hey, this isn't a friendship that really we want to be a part of anymore, because we lost that thing that kept us together. That happens when you have a friendship of pleasure. And so there's both of those, by the way, not inherently bad. We all have friendships of utility, of pleasure, but Aristotle said there's a better way. And I really think this is where Paul and the New Testament writers leaned in Christian relationships. And that is a friendship of virtue. Or Aristotle called this good friendship. There's something better. A good friendship is when you actively love someone for being who they are, with, and this is important, fostering a view to who they might become. And so you're on a journey with them in life. You love them for who they are and realize the potential in them, what God's turning them into, and even loving them as much or more than yourself. I think of this kind of friendship when I hear Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 12, where he says, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. What kind of relationship is that? That's a friendship of virtue. We're in this together. The rest of the friendships, the other two kinds, are utilitarian. These are driven by values. And yes, they're the hardest to make, but they're also the hardest to lose. They're thick rather than thin relationships. So we're not going to experience this in every friendship that we have, but we need some relationships that are good sort of friendships. Again, the New Testament, when it talks about Christian relationship, really presses in to this kind of, not specifically into Aristotle, but into this kind of relationship. So let me ask you a few questions. Is there someone in your life who maybe were thinking through friendships and leaning in that comes to your mind. Maybe it's someone you just met, or someone you've had a kind of a young relationship with, starting a friendship with. Maybe it's a relationship you've had a long time and you just like to level it up. Hey, I think this could be something deeper, not just of utility, but something better than that. Maybe you're looking to deepen many of your friendships. I think the result of that is you get to appreciate, some of you, it's just appreciating what you already have. Some of you have relationships like that. You go, yeah, man, I know there's been times in my friendships I haven't really appreciated what God has given me. And so maybe it's just saying, hey, I'm so thankful God has given me friendships like this. Or appreciate what a friend has invested in you, and maybe you didn't realize it. It doesn't just happen, and it's not 100% up to you. It takes two people to have a friendship. I get it, but Ruth helps us see the possibility for Christian friendship, for all friendships. So another question, where has God opened up opportunities? Thinking through some of these things. Where is God opening doors in your life? Do you see some right now? Maybe it's just a, oh, hello there type situation where someone's been there the whole time and you realize, hey, I want to press into this friendship. Sometimes it's the Spirit's prompting us, but we're just not listening. Sometimes the doors are open, but we're just not looking. What is God doing, stirring up in your life? A few years ago, I was wrestling with some stuff not related to friendship, just life stuff, and I was meeting with a trusted Christian counselor, and we were talking through some stuff, and through talking through some stuff, we got in the topic of friendship and some a friendship that had been stirred up in my life, and I was feeling, kind of weird about it. Sometimes when you're a pastor wrestling through the boundaries and friendships and things like that, and I just remember talking to him and him listening, and him really encouraging me in this, and he said, it sounds like this friendship is God-ordained. And I'll never forget his words, God ordained, and that might not have as much of an effect on you as me, because in that moment, I just had to realize, hey, friendship is something that God gives us, that's good, that's positive, that he uses in our life to get us through hard things. It's important. So sometimes it's just like permission that we need to have deep friendships in our life. Second thing maybe you can apply in your life, maybe you need to be sticky. Pursue friendship and don't give up easily. Do you make time for friendships in your life? I think a lot of us don't. Like, have you ever done this? Hey, we should get together. Let's get together. We'll get together. I'll call you up and we'll get together. Oh, we'll have you over. We'd love to have you over. Or, hey, let's go get coffee. I'm going to call you one of these days and we're going to go get coffee. Let's get coffee. And you just keep saying it every time you see him, right? And enter that SpongeBob meme like 8 years later. Nothing happens, right? You just keep saying that. Hey, let's just do this. And you never get together ever. Maybe it's not that you're a liar. You're just busy, right? And so you're just missing each other. Maybe there's that person in your life. And so maybe if you get anything from this morning, it's just a reminder, hey, I need to go through with this. Or here's a trick I've had to learn, and it's been kind of hard, just to do it right there. Instead of just talking about it and reaching out later, just pulling out your phone and typing in to say, hey, does this work for you? I've learned that from people in my life who will be like, we should get together sometime. They'll be like, how about Thursday at 6? And you're like, I guess I don't really have a choice, right? Like, let's just do it. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. Remind yourself that friendships, again, are good and worth it. And lastly, don't get scared off by the hard moments. Lean in. Lean into the waves and ride them. And surfing and kayaking and other water sports, and there's big waves coming in, the best thing that you can do, especially if you're in a canoe with two people, like a friendship, the best thing you can do is lean in. Lean into those waves. If you lean back, you'll probably topple over. If you've ever been in a deep friendship before, you've probably known this principle that I'm going to call the principle of weight distribution, which means that there's times where your friend is going through something and maybe you need to pick up the slack and lean in. Maybe you're going through something and God put you there again, put them there to comfort you. Lean in. It might be that God put you in their life for the hard moments or vice versa. Lean in and ride the waves and be a friend. God cares about friendship. And even though we live in a world that cares less and less about friendships, I want you to know this morning that God cares. And best of all, we talked about this last week, but we'd be remiss if we didn't say it again. God gave us a friend in Jesus. Jesus called us, when he was talking about his disciples, he called us his friends. And just like Jesus pursues us and was patient when we were slow to accept, or is patient when we're slow to accept what he offers us, let's follow that example of Jesus by being patient in building friendships. Yes, it is risky, but it is worth it. Will you pray with me? Father, we thank you that you have given us the greatest friend that we could ever ask for in Jesus Christ. And I don't want to miss in a series about friendship the fact that out of all the friendships we need the most, it's that relationship we have with your son. How awesome that you are a God who knows us. You know all the sticky things about us. You know all the things that we try to put under the rug. You know them. And even though you know all the dirt in our lives, you love us and love us with an everlasting, powerful love. And so we thank you for that friendship. And Lord, my prayer is that we would emulate that kind of friendship with humans around us in our life, in the church, outside the church. Help us to lean in. And as friendships are becoming more and more rare, help us to be models to the world about this is what friendship looks like. Not because we're masters at it, but because we know the master. And the master is in us, working through our lives, and an example to us in our day-to-day lives. Friendship is worth it, Lord, so help us to take that risk and make friends in our life. In your son's name, amen.